Welcome to Getting Rich Together. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. This show was born from my own journey. Coming out of a divorce, I reached out to 50 women to talk to them about money. 95% of them did not want to go there. That's when I realized we need spaces where wealth isn't hidden in silence, but shared in possibilities. Here, you'll meet women from all backgrounds, trailblazers, risk takers, visionaries, each expanding what wealth can look like. This is your place to be inspired, to discover new pathways, and to remember that we rise by building wealth together. Getting Rich Together is a Wealth Catalyst production. At Wealth Catalyst, we bring together education, networks, and great opportunities for women to build wealth and change the world. Now, on to today's show. I am here with the incredible Camille Scott-Wiles. Camille, everyone knows you today as someone who is helping others build a life of financial freedom. You are a financial advisor, but also what I think is so incredible is that you have spent your career as an ICU nurse. You have spent your lifetime in the service of others, helping others. And it's so incredible to get this opportunity to chat with you today as you have been moving into this space of helping others create financial freedom, which is sexy and delicious and so much fun. I'm so excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Your content is great. It's very informative. So I'm so glad to be part of the lineup.
Wonderful. So let's dive in to the juicy beginning. Camille, take us back. Before you knew you were going to be a nurse, before you were an incredible adult, you were once a little girl. You were obviously sometime between the ages of 5 and 12 years old, dreaming of a big world, experiencing so many things around you. Please take me back to that young girl. Where were you living? What did you see around you? What were your parents like? And what was money like for you at this young age?
Wow. My story is a little unique because I grew up in poverty, but I had a millionaire father. He owned his own general construction company. And of course, because my parents didn't stay together, I stayed in poverty with my mom while he went to live the good life with his previous 2 kids. Yeah. But his presence was still very much felt, even though he wasn't there around, because of course we still lived in the building that he owned. So that was kind of the gist. So I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, born and raised. Of course, both of my parents are from Jamaica. So I saw them early on struggle with finance. As a matter of fact, I realized that one of my biggest fears was poverty. And I got that from them because I saw how they struggled and they overcame it. They became pioneers in their own family. My father was the outcast of his family, and he really overcame that and built his real estate empire during the Reaganomics era, during the savings and loan crisis, where real estate prices went down like crazy. And he was able to buy them up for pennies on the dollar, fix them up himself, and rent them out to Caribbean migrants. So he did that for 40 years. My mother was working for Merrill Lynch at the time. That was her first job because she was a computer programmer. And at the time, that's when computers and typewriting was really getting big. And my mother learned her skills from Jamaica. So that was her very first job. And she was a career woman. She had no intention of having children. But when she met my father, everything changed. So that was really the beginning for me.
Wow. During this time of divorce, right, and starting to figure out the things around you, obviously your mom seemed like she was really strong woman, it seems like, being a young woman working in computer programming and doing these things that I imagine were not historically areas that women were working in, you know?
Correct.
This is definitely not common at the time. So how did you start to shape your vision, right? What were some of the early ways, I guess, in which you saw maybe what you wanted to be when you grew up? Or how did you sort of absorb some of the modeling around you?
In our culture, Jamaican culture, the nursing career is by far the most important career, other than lawyer and, of course, doctor. But being a nurse is very honorable. As a matter of fact, nursing is the most honorable profession. So being a nurse was like top tier. I saw my mother trying to become a nurse for over 30 years, up until the time when I became a nurse. So I always wanted to be a nurse. But because I saw how my father was making all this money and he was really successful, I veered into real estate first. That's what happened with me. And I became really successful as a property manager in Manhattan, working for Prudential Douglas Elliman at the time, managing 400, 500 unit buildings, rubbing shoulders with hedge fund managers, working across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. It was a great experience. And then 2008 happened. And mind you, I'm an undergrad, fresh out of college, was supposed to do nursing, but I decided to go into real estate. I couldn't do real estate anymore because the 2008 collapse happened. And so I saw my father also get wiped out a lot because he suffered a lot through that time. And my mother, she was struggling, of course. So my mother said, hey, let's pivot back into nursing. Let's go and apply for this scholarship together. And let's see if we can get in together. And I got the scholarship and she didn't. Literally a year after graduating from nursing school, I found out she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which metastasized to her liver. So it was a little too late for her. She always tried to become a nurse, but she never made it to graduation. That was the thing. So 30 years gone. And then my father, at the same time, even though he was struggling financially, he had prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, kidney cancer. Yeah, but he was a trooper. He was always, fighting it out, working it out. But unfortunately, a stroke took him out and he was in the hospital for 10 days, never came back out. And so my parents, now 62 years old, same age, they're both sick. I now found myself the only one with a career, the only one with a job, the only one who's stable, having to take care of both parents who are sick and dying of cancer, essentially. And so they both ended up passing away.
How did you do that, Camille?
I don't know. I honestly, I think it was a strength from my parents, honestly, to be honest. They died 19 hours apart, May 14th and May 15th of 2012. And I instantly became the matriarch of 2 families. And that was when I absolutely knew that I had to do something to sustain the family financially, not just through my career, but also through investments, because my mother had life insurance. My father didn't. Even though he had all these assets, he was not protected. So I firsthand know how it is when you pass away or you have a loved one that passes away and then everything is up in the air because nothing was protected, nothing was solidified, nothing was written down in paper, and nothing was taken care of. So it can be very traumatic.
Wow. That is wild. And how did you sort of go through this process? I want to double click a little bit, which is it's hard enough to manage one person's estate when they pass away. You're managing 2 people's estates, I imagine, in this process. Can you help our audience and help me get a little bit behind the scenes of some of the financial decisions and positions that you were having to make and what some of these processes were like and what it was like to navigate them?
Oh, wow. It was rough because the first thing you have to do is make sure that your loved one has a healthcare proxy, has a power of attorney. My father didn't have one. My mother did. When I tell you nothing was organized in a way in which I had to literally scramble to get everything done. And then, of course, who's going to make the medical decisions? Do you have anyone that will make sure whether or not, especially if you're incapacitated, to make that decision whether or not you should get blood, not get blood, whether you should have surgery, not have surgery, whether they should pull the plug? I had to make that decision, even though, and thank God my family trusted my decision because I was the only nurse in the family. So they trusted my decision and my leadership. You can imagine if my family didn't, it would have been chaos, as you can imagine. Navigating the scenes there, thank God I had family support. They saw how I took care of my mother, so they knew how I was going to take care of my father. And we were able to get through it. But of course, it was the financial aspect that was really the struggle. Because not only did I have to deal with assets in the United States, I had to deal with assets in Jamaica, which is a completely different world. You're talking about their own laws, their own regulations, their own processes. And of course, I wasn't born in Jamaica. So how do you navigate that? I had to get an attorney, a trusted law firm. I had to do my research and I had to literally go through all the red tape just to make sure to know what was in my father's bank account. What did he have? How many properties did he have? I didn't know any of this stuff. So I had to literally search through attorneys to find this stuff. And thank God I was able to find it.
And you're also working, I imagine, as you're navigating this, correct? I mean, you also had a full-time job while you are navigating these other financial systems.
Just starting my nursing career.
Yeah, so much to manage, right? As you were sort of navigating that process, what are some of the things that I guess you then incorporated into your own life? What did you learn from that were like moments that you realized that you were going to do things differently?
Oh man, the first thing was life insurance. When I tell you my mother, thank God she had life insurance from I think 20 years prior. My father had none. Thank God I had took out a policy on him 5 years prior. No other sibling had did this, but I did it. Yeah. So thank God I was the smart one that did that. So, because of course my mother was always the one that always had her stuff organized. My father was always a free spirit. Thank God life insurance is the number one thing. The second thing, of course, is having a living trust. Both of my parents did not have that. If they had that, they would have been able to dictate exactly who gets what. And of course, that includes the will, that can include life insurance as well, and all the other assets and structures in place, real estate. They did not have that. So I knew I had to have that structure. And if I had clients in the future or any, colleagues that needed that help, I would advise them the same thing, because this was my experience dealing with my parents. So it was really traumatic, but thank God I was able to navigate through it because I had the funeral receipts. That's what saved me, honestly, because I was the only one that paid for the funeral, the double funeral. So because I had those funeral receipts, I was able to take them to Jamaica and show with my birth certificate, of course, I'm the daughter, and this is the receipts. And I was able to show the death certificate. My name is on the death certificate. This is what literally saved me from being able to take care of the estates.
That is incredible. And so at this point, when you're sort of navigating, rebuilding, it sounds like your financial life coming out, moving now into starting your career again and in nursing, and you're navigating what's happening with your parents passing away. How were you sort of, and it sounds like, did you have anyone else at the time? Was anyone else supporting you in the family? Was anyone else sort of responsible or had any sort of help when it came to managing any of the finances? Like, how did you navigate paying for all of this stuff? Were you resourced? Was it like, I'm putting this on my credit card, or like, thank God I have savings to help me? Like, how did you think about these really tenuous moments of the world is happening to me, and here I am, God, with all of everything that I have? What did you have? What were you resourced with to help you through this?
The number one thing was, thank God my mother had savings. She saved quite enough so that I could not only pay for the funeral, but I can go back and forth to Jamaica, travel, stay in hotels, pay attorneys, all of that stuff. Thank God. She was the smart one to handle all that. So when I tell you, at least she had everything under control. And then when I finally was able to access my father's money, then I was able to really start to access stuff. Because one thing I learned, especially when you have assets overseas, you never want to have it in your own name. You want to definitely have it under someone else's name that you trust, like a child, for instance, so that if anything were to happen to you, it can easily transition. The institution will be able to say, okay, you were on the account, boom, you'll be able to handle that. But that didn't happen with my father, so I had to go through all the red tape. So that's clue number one. If anyone has assets overseas, keep that in mind. For me, it was definitely because of my mother's savings. That's what really saved me. And of course, she had a life insurance policy. That extremely helped. And of course, because the policy with him that I was able to take out, I was able to combine that and decided, okay, I need to start investing this properly so that not only does my siblings don't get to spend the money, because of course, everyone had spending issues, including myself, but it was going to be the most responsible thing to grow the money and also to make sure everyone was financially secure. So that's how I entered precious metals.
That's incredible. Wow, Camille, that's so powerful. And so when you were working with your siblings to decide, right, was the conversation like, okay, we are going to collectively decide that our parents' money is going to go in this direction? And then what did you guys draft up a contract? Was it we each get 25% of this, or like we just promise to like help each other when we need? Like, how did you guys sort of think about mutually, right, investing all of these resources together, with you obviously as the fiduciary responsible person who's sort of managing all of it? What was that conversation like with them?
Actually, to be honest with you, the only conversations I had was with my younger siblings, because my older siblings, of course, had no interest at all in anything that my father had, to be honest. And of course, they had no interest in Jamaica, especially. That was another thing. I was the only child that was interested in Jamaica, which was so odd. No one is interested in my father's assets. So with my younger siblings, of course, they were in total agreement. They followed my lead and they said, Camille, we know that you're fiscally responsible. You've always been responsible with money. You've always been able to handle it. You're the only one with a job, the only one with a career. We trust your judgment. So whatever you decide, we were behind you 100%. So me and my younger siblings, we just trucked through, and we're the only ones left now because I lost my older sister a few years later, and it's just been, one tragedy after another, but it's just me and my younger siblings now, and we're the only ones left standing, handling the estate. But we're doing much better financially because of the decisions I made back then. Had I not made those final decisions, I think we would have certainly been depleted at this point, especially now with the economic turmoil that's happening right now.
Totally. So let's go deeper into how you started to educate yourself. You were savvy enough to take out this life insurance policy. Talk about just a very smart decision. Sounds like your mom had it together. You picked up some of the best, maybe, of both of your parents, right? In terms of how to think about money. And
as a matter of fact, I would tell you, I learned more from what they didn't do than what they did do.
Wow, I love that. I love that. So how did you then start to educate yourself beyond, let's say, what you were forced to learn during this time period? So it sounds like estate planning and those sorts of things you maybe had to learn by virtue of the situation. But how did you then start to bridge the gap of learning other ways you can invest your money? What was your first step? How did you get started?
Oh, wow. Well, the first step was going back to my real estate roots. I had followed a lot of guys at the time, a lot of gurus in the space, especially when it came to private equity, hedge funds, things of that nature. And then Robert Kiyosaki was one of my first rich dad advisors because I was always following him and always reading his books. And there was one particular advisor that he had on his team called Mike Maloney. This guy specializes in wealth cycles. And I realized, oh my goodness, I need to learn wealth cycles and I need to learn them quick. Which asset class is on the upswing and which ones are on the downside? And which one should I pull out of and get into when it's down so that when it rides up, I can then exit? Yeah. So Mike Maloney wrote a book, one of the best-selling books called The Guide to Gold and Silver, and it changed my life. He also started a YouTube channel called The Hidden Secrets of Money. Absolutely blown away. When I tell you it's wealth of education, wealth of realization, how money is created, how money is printed, how the real estate market, because he was one of the first to even warn about what was going to happen in 2008. That was the one thing that really cleared out to me. So I said, well, if he knew, he saw the signs that the real estate market was going to collapse. Other people knew. So I started looking at other people who were also giving out warnings. And I started to do the research. Then I saw what happened in Iceland. I saw what happened in other countries as a result of the real estate crisis. And I said, wow. And I saw documentaries like Inside Job, great documentary. It just showed everything of what needed to. PBS Frontline did excellent documentaries on the 2008 collapse. That's what led me to the journey. I say, listen, the only asset class that I can truly trust is precious metals. But I needed to also learn what to buy, how to buy, where to buy it, and how to store it. Because this is very important too. There's so many layers to this. And no one's looking at precious metals at the time. Everybody's looking at stocks. Everybody's looking at bonds. Everybody's looking at real estate. But no one's looking at the one asset class that's always been 5,000 years of history, doesn't lie, but always had these ups and downs, ebbs and flows. But what makes commodities so important now, especially with the economic climate today, as in back then when my parents passed? So that's what led me to the journey.
What's so fascinating is you're doing all this learning while you were working, right? I mean, you were, keeping your day to day and then started to sort of naturally have curiosity.
Working up to 136 hours a week.
Wow. So how did you find the time, Camille? Like, let's break it down. The first time, so you're reading these books, you're inspired. The first time where you said, okay, I'm going to go from these assets are sitting in these other accounts to I'm going to make my first investment or my first purchase in this new asset class that you were learning about. When did you do it? How much money did you put into it? And how scared or excited were you at that moment? What was it like when you were like, I'm going to put my toe in this water and give this a shot?
Oh, wow. Well, I think the initial amount that I put in was about 50,000. I knew what I was doing was the correct way to do it because I had looked up the significance of silver, especially as an industrial metal. Silver was by far my favorite investment, and it was the one that I dived in head first. Then I did gold sparingly over the time because, of course, gold is much more expensive. I paid attention to the gold to silver ratio, too. Historically, gold and silver has been always 15-1. During the time of the Egyptians, it was 1-3. But now it's trading at 100-1, and silver is still below its all-time high of $50. So when you look at the ratios, especially the Dow to gold ratio, which is something else that you have to look at, even now with cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin to gold ratio, when is the right time to go into these assets based on the ratios and when is it time to get out? So I knew that based on the ratios, it was the right time to get into precious metals because at the time, the ratio was about 180-1. Yeah, it was about 80-1 at the time. And so that was a great time to get into silver, especially so that I could figure out an exit plan because you don't want to go into any asset without realizing the exit plan. You have to always have an exit strategy before getting into any type of asset. So I knew if I got into silver now, I can then develop an exit strategy or have an exit strategy to transfer into gold once silver's price matches up to gold. Because silver has always followed the price of gold historically. So that's why I said, well, silver is actually the best bet. So I definitely want to get into that. So yeah, 50,000 at first. Then it went to 150,000. And then, of course, I made six figures every single year in nursing in my lifetime. Thank God I was able to do that and working in ICU. So I was able to stack and continue to accumulate over time. And that's what helped me be able to quadruple my portfolio over time, just by the fluctuations of the price and the particular products that I brought and purchased, which is why I teach people how to do the same thing, because the space can be very precarious. And especially if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose money. That's my path.
Pause for a second. If you're not already on the Wealth Catalyst Substack, you are missing out. Over 20,000 people have subscribed, and they are diving into stories, strategies, and money expanders you won't find anywhere else. Join us today and keep fueling your wealth journey. Check out the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. Camille, as you're sort of thinking about, diversification of your own assets or how you're looking at sort of your financial life, obviously life insurance, I think, is a big part of how you look at sort of overall, life planning. But I know that there's also different kinds of life insurance, and there are different ways of sort of thinking about that as an instrument that can protect you. Can you shed a little bit of light as to your experience, understanding these different kinds of ways of thinking about life insurance, and sort of maybe how are you using it for yourself? How have you sort of implemented some of these strategies around that?
Oh, yeah. Excellent. So just for your audience to keep in mind, the products that we even have in life insurance is very, very different and has evolved a lot from, I would say, 5 years ago before COVID. But there's one particular life insurance product that I have for myself. I have a few, as a matter of fact, that I wish I had for my parents. I wish they had it on me when I was young. But this is a product that was created when the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. It was also when the IRS was created. The elites created this particular life insurance policy that's protected under 7702-A of the IRS code. And it is called the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy. Yes. And they created it at the time because they knew that the United States citizens was going to be heavily taxed, but they didn't want to be taxed. So they created this product in which they could put as much money in it as possible in order to withdraw it tax-free. And you can use it for retirement. They can also borrow against the cash value as a loan, of course, paying zero taxes, of course, because life insurance is no tax. And you had a death benefit on top of that. Talk about protection. Talk about being an insider, knowing what they were doing and knowing how to protect themselves. But the public had no idea. Fast forward to now, people like you and me have access to this stuff, but we don't know. And it's all about education. So this has been my mission, to educate people, everyday professionals, especially nurses, about these products.
Wow. And so like when it comes to sort of going down this path of figuring out, let's say, this particular life insurance, there are so many different kinds of policies, right? And so many different ways that I think a lot of people either hand it over to some advisor and say, hey, tell me what you think, and I'll sort of do what you say. I know you're a big proponent, and so am I, of understanding what's important to us and then telling people, hey, this is what I want, and this is sort of how I want to live my life. Now, you help me make the best decisions based on what I want, rather than farming out these decisions. So as you're sort of thinking about this particular life insurance policy, is it something that anyone could ask their life insurance brokers and say, hey, I want to get this kind of policy? Or is it something that these brokers are not incentivized to sell? Or, how do you sort of think about where one person might be able to get some edge here on asking for the right things?
Okay, well, excellent question. I really, really love this interview. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I would tell you, a lot of brokers will not recommend the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy because they'd rather you be in investments, things in which they can make even a higher commission spread. I make no commission off of what you invest in. That's the difference. As a broker myself, as a financial broker, I The insurance company pays me, not you. But of course, with these brokers, they get fees from whatever money you put in, as well as on the back end, especially when they package it up and sell it to other institutional investors. So you have to keep that in mind. What are they incentivized? What is their incentives for recommending certain products to you? What are their conflict of interest? That's another thing. If they work as a fiduciary, that's great. But a lot of them work for institutions in which only promote their products. So you really have to keep that in mind. I work with over 30 carriers. So it depends on what your needs are. I have products that can help protect your mortgage in case you cannot pay your mortgage or in case you fall behind on your mortgage. The policy can kick in. What if you get sick on the job and you can no longer work? I have policies that can protect your income, term with living benefits. These are policies that, in addition to an IUL, can certainly protect you and give you that financial peace of mind that you really need. And on top of that, without having to touch your retirement savings, because right now your retirement savings are at risk in these markets, especially with these private equity firms trying to put all of their junk assets into your pension that right now, especially your 401k and IRA, and that's a huge issue right now. But what if you don't have to dip into that? What if you had an IUL or term with living benefits that would protect your income and protect your retirement and you're not having to pay anyone a fee? That's absolutely what it should be. But a lot of these financial gurus, so to speak, they work on commission and they're going to only recommend what their special interests are. So you have to keep that in mind.
So obviously, Camille, you're super bullish on precious metals, which I think is something that for most people is still really hard to understand, right? I feel like a lot of times we think about gold and we think about the jewelry we're wearing, or we think about silver and we look at our utensil drawer and we're putting out the silverware. But this idea of sort of putting money into these commodities, if you will, that sound, right, like the things that were important many years ago or hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, don't necessarily feel so relevant today. And so I'd love for you to share not only how bullish you are, so what percentage of your portfolio have you allocated in this capacity, but also what are some of the reasons as to why you're so bullish, especially given what is happening in today's sort of global economic climate?
Wow. Well, the first thing is the money printing. As I mentioned before, the Federal Reserve, they are in charge of interest rates, but they're also in charge of the printing of our currency. And we've literally lost a lot of value in our own currency to the point where the rest of the world is now waking up and they're no longer buying our debt. They're no longer buying our US treasuries. That's a huge issue. China has literally stopped. Japan has stopped as well. And once the United States kind of seized Russian assets, it kind of woke the whole world up like, oh, okay, we don't get along with you. You're going to seize ours too. That's when all the central banks around the world simultaneously started to accumulate gold. And now they have 50% of their portfolio in gold. What does that tell you? They're the ones that's in charge of the printing press, especially the Federal Reserve. However, you still don't have any gold, but they have 50% of their portfolio. That should tell you something. The second thing is the United States debt. They're past $37 trillion now. Meanwhile, your retirees have $84 trillion in retirement savings. That's the largest concentration of wealth in history. And I believe that they are getting into debt, creating all of these schemes and all of these tax incentives for the rich in order to siphon off that retirement money for themselves, especially to creating laws to siphon off of people's retirement savings. And I feel that they are really at risk in these markets, especially with the fluctuations of the markets due to market manipulation. So that's another reason why you should be owning precious metals. On top of that, third-party risk is a huge deal. When you hear that the Central Bank of Japan raised their interest rates, and as a result, there's a worldwide margin call where $6 trillion is wiped out of the markets within 2 days. This happened in August 5th, by the way. You really have to wake up and realize, wow, so something in Japan happens and my portfolio is down 25%? That's not right. So precious metals is certainly another reason why you should be getting precious metals. And another reason too, to be honest with you, since my parents passed, it gave me peace of mind knowing that if the power grid was to go down, if I couldn't barter with anything, if I couldn't access my bank account, if there was a banking holiday, what would I be able to use to buy my food, to buy my gas, to pay my bills? I would have something to barter with, and that would be gold and silver. So those are 4 reasons right there. But peace of mind is the ultimate one. That's the number one for me.
Wow. And then as far as your own sort of allocation strategy, I know you mentioned, You're also doing some options trading and sort of doing other things with investing. How aggressive are you with your portfolio in this category?
Okay, so initially it was a 60-40, which means 60% of it was in precious metals, but now it's about 75 to 25. And that's because a few reasons, because of the geopolitical climate that's happening right now. And of course, the dollar is being definitely misused and distrusted by world banks. Now, I'm an avid traveler. I travel a lot around the world. And of course, what I noticed when I exchange my US currency to other currencies, they no longer really want to accept US dollars. That's what I began to notice. When you go to Africa, you go to the Caribbean, you go to Southeast Asia, these are the places that are not, they rather accept their own currency rather than US currency. And a lot of people don't realize that, especially because they don't travel. But I notice it. So these are the headwinds that are happening for us, and we need to really be prepared.
Wow. And then one more question, around like evaluating. Obviously, everyone sort of takes a look at their portfolios, on various sort of bases. Obviously, your livelihood and business now is in helping others. And so looking at the markets, I imagine, is something that you're doing more often than most, I imagine. But when you're sort of thinking about your own asset management and just how often, maybe more so in the years where you were building or learning, now it's really your job. But when those years when you're building or learning, how often did you check your accounts? How often are you sort of reevaluating even now what your personal plan is? Is it on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis? How long are you sort of sticking to things before you make adjustments?
Now that I've officially walked away from nursing, I check and rebalance my portfolio on a daily basis. I'm on top of it every day. And I think everyone should be on the same path as well. You should be on top of your finances every single day. You shouldn't take your eye off the ball at all, because things are happening so fast. Technology is evolving so fast. And there's so many ways now to make money that you should definitely be paying attention and really, truly see what your options are. There's really no excuse to not be educated in this environment where you have podcasts like this one, where you can learn so much, and you have YouTube. You have so many sources of information. But of course, I'm here to guide you if possible. But of course, like I was guided through YouTube, I was guided through podcasts like this. And to learn about AI, to learn about history, economic history, which is hugely important. A lot of people don't know economic history. And if they don't know it, they're doomed to repeat it and to be sucked into the same entities that create the mess, but then come up with a solution and claim to be the hero. Not this time. I think people are waking up, especially me. And of course, we definitely want to look at it and evaluate your portfolio every single day. So I look at the charts. I look at the gold to silver ratio. I look at the Dow to gold ratio. I look at the Bitcoin to gold ratio and see whether or not I should buy more Bitcoin, whether I should buy more silver, more gold, or whether I should hold back. The futures market, especially futures trading, I look at that definitely not so much to trade, but to see when to get in and get out. Because futures actually dictates to you how many traders are anticipating whether the price of gold is going to go up or down. So I definitely look at those factors as well. But yeah, that's how I evaluate every single day. I'm on top of it.
Wow, that's really incredible, Camille. Looking to the future, thinking about legacy, thinking about what you're building, you're building this incredible body of work. You're a teacher, you're an author, you have this firm. What is it as you're to sort of think about your life, and I do believe that, you'll be able to, with all the science and technology these days, we'll all be able to just live very long lives. And so as you're sort of thinking about legacy that you want to leave behind on this planet, what does that look like for you?
Oh, wow. My legacy is to be able to not only educate as many people as possible, but also to advance, being that, yes, you're right. A lot of people are living much longer. So there's technology out there that can help that. However, if you're living longer, how are you making sure that your portfolio can sustain that? That's why I'm on this mission to make sure that a lot of people's finances are secure, stable, and growing to combat inflation, to combat taxation, to combat creditors, combat debts, things of that nature, because a lot of people need that help. So for me, legacy for me is owning my own hospital system. Legacy for me is people reading my books, especially school kids in school, reading my books, high school students, becoming financial literate through my literature, being able to build my brokerage where I'm helping other agents get educated just as I have. and guide them and help brand them as well so that they can also branch out as entrepreneurs, not just being financial brokers, but they can also have their social media, their YouTube, their stuff and branch out and really know how to brand themselves. So this is what I do. And this is what I definitely see my future and especially my children. My children, I have no children yet, but I'm doing all of this body of work so that when they see it one day, they can say, hey, this is what mommy did. I want to follow in her footsteps. So yeah, that's what I see my legacy as.
I love that so much, Camille. Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So tell me, obviously we've talked so much about money and all the different ways of building it and investing it and preserving it. My last two final questions are usually always my favorite. The first being, what are your most favorite ways to spend your money, my love? How do you like to have a great time? What do you like to do with it? So tell me, what do you like to spend your money on?
Vacations. I know I know a lot of people are guilty of this, but the last place I went to was Guatemala and Belize. And I know a lot of people, when they think of Guatemala, they think of the migrant crisis and whatnot. Do not listen to the noise. Guatemala is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. They have one of the ninth wonders of the world over there. It is fantastic. The food, the people, the culture, the Mayan and the Inca empires. When you learn the history, it's beautiful. So traveling is definitely where I like to spend my money. But I do it in a way in which can be a tax write-off. So be very wary of that. Very smart.
That's right. I love that. And then my last question, Camille, is obviously our audience loves to uplift and support the other women on the show, whether that's through sharing things or things that you're needing right now or supporting the work that you're doing, engaging with you further. How can we support you? What is it you're calling in right now? What is it you need?
Okay. I am calling for everyone to go to preciousmetalsmasterclass.com, see the list of books that I have available, watch the webinar that you got to watch, and really get educated. This is completely 100% for free. The books, of course, are hugely inspiring. The artwork I made myself in the books as well, because not only are you inspired by the art, but you're inspired by the poetry, by the words, by my experience, by my struggle, and of course, my story. And so if I can inspire any one of you guys by my story, by my struggle and what I was able to go through and how I'm here, standing, surviving, and literally on the other side, shining, that'll be really, really wonderful if I can inspire any one of you to do the same. So yes, preciousmetalsmasterclass.com. The bookstores are on the site. And if you enjoyed the books, feel free to hashtag me and read the books and share with people like, hey, I found this great book. Visit this store and I support Camille and go to her website because this book is great. I even wrote 3 children's books on financial literacy called the Umbrella Collection. And it literally is like gold and silver. The coins are walking this young child in different scenarios, seeing what mommy and daddy's going through, whether it's losing their house or losing their job. And what can gold and silver do in that moment? What can life insurance do in that moment? What can annuities do in that moment? So these books are really designed to educate not only older ones, but young ones as well.
I love that, Camille. You're a real rock star. I'm grateful to get to know you, to have spent this hour with you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for being here today on Getting Rich Together.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And you're such a beautiful person. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Getting Rich Together. My hope is that you leave every episode feeling more inspired, more powerful, and more connected. Until next time, remember, you have everything it takes to create wealth on your terms.